Hey, welcome to The Feast Life, where we empower you, the modern homeschool mom, to create a life and homeschool you love. I'm Julie Ross, the creator of the award-winning curriculum A Gentle Feast, a homeschool veteran of over 20 years, and a certified Christian life coach. Charlotte Mason said, life should be all living, not a mere tedious passing of time. So on this show, we seek to savor the feast of life. So go get your favorite beverage and pull up a chair. You're welcome at this table. Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Feast Life. I'm your host, Julie Ross, and I'm here today with Greta Eskridge, who you may know better as Ma and Pa Modern on Insta. And we are going to be talking about her new book, It's Time to Talk to Your Kids About Porn. So if you have little ones, you might want to pause this and listen to this episode later or put in some earbuds. But it's a very important conversation, and I'm so grateful, Greta, that you wrote this book, but just that you've been talking about this for a while now on your social media platform, because I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. So thank you for coming on today.
Oh, I'm so glad you had me, or are having me, I guess, right now. I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you. So in the beginning of the book, you describe yourself as an unlikely porn fighter. So what led you to pick up this mantle?
It was a lot of things. I say that I'm an unlikely porn fighter for starters, because I grew up in a traditional Christian home where we were pretty sheltered. I was homeschooled, and we just really didn't talk about sex very much. We certainly didn't talk about porn, but we also didn't need to, because it was the 80s and there was no internet. And so pornography was hard to find. And it was not something that I encountered ever as a kid or even as a teen or young adult. So my parents they could just not say so much. But as a result, it was not a subject that I was at all comfortable with. I could have never imagined talking about pornography with even like my closest friends, let alone strangers on a stage, online, or in a book. In that sense, it seems so strange to me that now I'm a porn fighter. Yeah, it seems unlikely. And yet here I am. So that's that part of the background. But then also I stumbled into it after I was touched personally by pornography in my marriage with my husband, and discovering that he had a porn addiction. And that was a devastating reality that we faced. He sought recovery and is now walking in recovery, and has been for many years, and helps other men who are dealing with that issue. And as part of my healing and my recovery, I decided I wanted to help moms specifically, because we could talk about this in a way that I could help them with their kids, because I wanted to help my own kids. And it seemed like it's a great time to be able to help others as well. And so that is how my journey began. And eventually it was like, I have all this information and all of this learning, and it needs to be really accessible. So I put it all in a book, and here I am.
Congratulations. I know that is not an easy task. And I just want to say I really appreciated that you were very vulnerable and honest in the book. I think that's really key. And I do feel like, are you frozen? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. It was frozen, but I
Okay.
could hear you the whole time. But
Oh,
your face was frozen.
yeah, you
So
were frozen to me too. And I'm like, that's okay.
yeah.
My
But I
daughter,
could hear you. I could hear you. But yeah.
my daughter edits the podcast, so she can fix all this stuff.
Okay. She can deal with that.
Yeah, we'll let her
Sorry.
take it. Abigail. No, it's all good. Who knows? But I'm sure that had to be really hard to step out and publicly say this is something our family is going through. What gave you the courage to do that?
I really believe that shame is a tool of Satan to keep us hiding. And when there is a story of redemption and healing and hope, which is what our story is, and which is what I believe is available for everyone, why would we want to keep that hidden? We shouldn't. That is like God at work in our lives. And we should be sharing that with everyone, saying, look at what God can do. But shame wants you to say, oh, yes, you've been healed and forgiven, but you're still, and then believe all these things that are not true. And that is part of what Aaron, my husband, and I worked through, to say, we're not going to believe those lies. We're not going to sit in shame and say, this is something we have to hide because we are ashamed. We can say, this was not what we wish would have happened. We wish we would have had a different story. But since this is what happened, but look what God did, we can then share the story of redemption and not hide, because that's where freedom comes. Freedom for us and freedom for many others.
Yeah, and I think it is so good for other moms to know that they're not alone in this. Not just,
Yeah.
I know we're talking about kids here, but just in terms
Yeah.
of marriages as well. So
Right.
many
Yeah.
devastations. And I love that your story is one of such hope. And I've seen that as well. But it can be very isolating as a mom to not have other
Yes.
friends to talk to and go, oh, this is what's going on in our family. So I love that you're a voice of, no, we can actually talk about this, because I feel like more moms do need
Yeah.
to talk about it, not just we need to talk about it for our kids' sakes, but we also need to talk about it for our own
Yes.
healing sakes.
Yeah. For sure.
Um,
Both of those
yeah.
things are totally true. Yeah.
So doing
Yeah.
this,
I was going to say, I think one of my hopes is that by reaching parents and giving them the tools to equip their kids, that they can help their kids now write a different story, so that by the time they're adults and they're stepping into marriage or they are married, they're not dealing with the baggage that, like my husband and I grew up with, very minimal help or training or tools regarding pornography in that world. I want to say, oh, let's give something more and better for our kids. We don't blame our parents. Like, they had very little available to them, right? Like, it was just something nobody was talking about. And so I'm like, we can do better though. We can do better now with the knowledge we have and the tools that are available and the research that's available, so that we can give our kids a better chance. Because, man, if it was hard for us, holy cow, it's so hard for our kids. So yes, we need to do better for them. And yes, that's why we're doing it. It is about marriages in the now, but it's also about marriages in the future. It's about kids who are growing up, give them the tools now so they can grow up into healthy adults, to have sexual integrity, because they've been given the tools and the training as kids to know what to do when they encounter porn, and hopefully make better choices.
Yeah, and what you said is so true. I think in the 80s it was like not so prevalent. We're going to be okay if we don't ever talk about this. But then we all grew up to be like adults and we were like, oh no, it wasn't okay. And we didn't turn out okay by not having conversations. And so that's the fuel of, we want to do better, like you're saying, and we now have tools to help us do better, like your book and others. But we also, our kids aren't growing up in the world that we grew up in. And so can you talk a little bit? You mentioned that we now live in a pornified culture. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, we do live in a pornified culture. Our kids are growing up in a different, totally different world than we are. And a pornified culture, okay, that makes sense. You think like porn is easily accessible. We all know that. Like, it's at everyone's fingertips on a phone. Just this weekend, people on Twitter, which pornography is available on Twitter, but a very prominent person on Twitter was posting full on pornography on his Twitter account that is followed by millions and millions of people. And people were shocked. And it's everywhere on Twitter already. You guys just, or X, whatever it's called now. I'm not on there. So
Me either. I
but
don't understand this platform.
yeah. So in that sense, yes, we live in a pornified culture. It's all over. It's on social media. It's easily accessible. Your kid could find it by accidentally doing a Google search that takes them down a rabbit hole and they discover pornography accidentally, or on a device, they click on a pop-up ad. So in that sense, we all understand what pornified culture means. But in addition, what I think it's really important for parents to know is that pornified culture also means a desensitizing to the over sexualization of everything. And pornography is obviously over sexualization, a warping and twisting of sexualization. And we are desensitized to it. And our kids are growing up being desensitized to it because it's everywhere. It's on billboards, it's on magazines at the grocery store, it's in advertisements, it's in movies, music. It's just sex sells and it's everywhere. And so they become desensitized to it, but also our culture normalizes pornography and tries to act like it's no big deal. How many TV shows and jokes are there about pornography and people watching it and everybody does it? And why are you so uptight? That's the message our kids are being fed. They're being fed that it's normal, it's no big deal. They see it all over the place, even if it's soft porn, not hardcore pornography, but still it's pornography and over sexualization. And all of that begins to, without them even being aware, seep into their psyche and what they believe about themselves and others. And it changes the way we view sex and ourselves as sexual humans and each other. And I think that it's something we need to be aware of, and we need to offer our kids something different.
Yeah. Thank you for explaining it that way. That's really helpful to see the pervasiveness of it and just what it is doing to their, yeah, just their view of sex to begin with. Like before
Yeah.
we, so it's not like, what age should you have this conversation? Or we will have
Right.
this conversation when this happens, but it's like, this needs to happen to every family needs to be having this conversation with their children at some point. So how do you navigate this is what we should talk about here and this is what we should talk about there and not wait to the moment when it's like you discover something, which is what I hear
Yeah.
from parents on like a weekly basis of what do I do
Yes.
now? And it's, oh, I
Yeah.
thought my kid was fine. They were only 10. They were only 8. I didn't think I
Yeah.
was going to have this conversation this young. So how do you navigate those waters?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that is the reality, is that we're so many of us are so uncomfortable with the topic. And we think also, oh, my kid's so young, they're not going to be exposed. We don't have to talk about this yet. And then we find ourselves in a place of, oh man, it's like now it's too late because they already saw porn and I have to either try to do damage control or just be like, oh, I saw too late. I can't do anything. And I don't think either of those things need to be our response. My goal is always to help parents to be proactive and to talk before exposure happens. And so that is that is as young as 6 or 7 years old, because kids are on devices and they're around all kinds of other people who are on devices. So even if your kid is, you're like, my kid is never on a device, they don't have a phone, they don't play games on my phone, they don't have access to the internet unless I'm sitting right next to them. And that's fantastic. Like, kudos to you. I'm so proud of you for creating that safe environment for your kid. But if your kid is ever around other kids of any age who are playing on devices or looking at their mom's phone, or they're around grown-ups who are on devices, you don't know what another kid could show them, or another person, or what that other person or kid sees, and then your kid sees it too. So what you need to do is give your kids a plan for what to do when they see pornography. And yes, that's as young as age 6, 7, 8 years old, telling them, hey, this is what pornography is. It's something bad for your body, your brain, and your heart. And it's my job to keep you safe. And here's what to do if you see it. And it's that simple, it's that quick, but that gives them the tools. So when accidental exposure happens, they are not left stranded and shocked and horrified or curious or ashamed. They're like, oh, I remember mom said something about this. I know what to do. And that is so empowering, and it's so helpful for them to move forward in a positive way rather than a negative way.
Yeah. I like that. I love this concept. You're preparing them like this plan, right? And you're giving them the
Yeah.
words to say. But what if their kid is 10 and it's not an accidental exposure, it's an intentional
Yes.
exposure?
Yeah, that is also a common scenario. I just was talking to a mom last night who said that she found her son had been looking up terms online.
Yep.
And I want to start by saying, I remember being a kid myself and like looking in encyclopedia and seeing photographs of people
Yeah.
where it's culturally the norm to wear no shirts or to have just a tiny covering on the lower part of their body, right? And seeing those things and being like, wow, that's really different, and being curious about it because it's so different than what I knew. But the difference between kids then, like me, and kids now is a kid now could go on Google and they could look up anything and they can get way more information than me looking through an
Yeah.
encyclopedia or even a dictionary. You're a little kid, you're 10 years old and you're curious about the body parts. And so you look them up in the dictionary to find their names. That's really different than a kid Googling body parts and
Yeah.
who knows what they're going to see. They're not just going to see words, they're going to see images, they're going to see videos. And parents are like, oh, my child's so horrible. Your child isn't so horrible. Your child is probably just a curious kid because we're all curious. We want to know
Mhm.
how our body works. We want to know how other people's body works. God created us as sexual human beings, people who want to know things. Your kid isn't horrible, but the internet is horrible. And the internet
Yeah.
is going to introduce them to way more than they should ever know about. And that means we need to even help our kid who's dealing with that situation. So if that's your kid's situation and they've seen something they should not have, our first response needs to be not one of judgment or anger towards them, because we need to have that grace and compassion in the moment and even the understanding they had no idea what they were getting themselves
Mhm.
into. They don't know what's waiting for them on the other side of that question. And so we need to, like I said, respond with compassion and grace and say, I'm so sorry you saw things that you should never have seen. And I want to help you right now. You have to find out what they've seen to the best of your knowledge. Look at search history or try to get it out of them. What have you been exposed to? Because if they've been exposed just once or twice, that's something that you can probably deal with on your own at home. But if this has
Mhm.
been going on for weeks or months and they've been exposed to some really problematic thing or things, then you might need to get outside help from a counselor who has more specific knowledge on this topic. And then once you've gotten details about what they've been exposed to, then you need to obviously spend time together in prayer, asking for God to help remove those images, help them not to remember. If He would grant that, pray for that, and do everything you can to fill their minds and their hearts with things that are good. Spend time outside, spend time together, be with friends, just fill their life with all the good things that God has filled their world with. And then lastly, you're going to want to talk about those steps of keeping them safe while they're online. So changing the rules of the way you use devices and screens in your home. But that shouldn't be like the first thing. That's going to come later
Yeah.
on. The first thing is compassion, addressing them with grace and love, and moving forward from that.
Yeah, I love how you just paint this picture of creating a safe place that your kids do feel comfortable coming to you and talking to
Yeah.
you. And even if they don't, that when it's something you are aware of something, you are able to have a conversation that is healing and not harmful, and that they keep wanting to come back and
Yeah.
having the conversation. You mentioned kind of some safety devices in terms of technology and navigating that. Sometimes I feel like I need to have an IT degree at my house for like all the different
I
things.
know.
And then I have 5 kids. So I have 2 adults and then 3 teenagers. And it's a totally different world in the past 4 years from the first round to this new round of teenagers.
Yes,
And I'm like,
I know.
and yes, there's lots of things we can do to keep our kids safe, but we also need to teach our kids how to use technology safely. And we want them
Hmm.
to be able to look up YouTube videos for something they're learning about in history or whatever. We want to use
Yeah.
it as a positive educational tool. How do
Right.
we navigate keeping our kids safe while also allowing them to use something that can be really helpful in their education?
Yeah, I think you start making it as absolutely safe as possible when they're young and having a lot of tools in place and restrictions in place, honestly, because when they're little, that's the most common time for accidental exposure. And you want to minimize that. And they also just don't need access. They need the least amount of access as possible. So installing things like a router so that helps limit problematic content coming into your house, and having rules in place. Oh, if you want to look something up on the internet, you do it with mom or dad with you. You use devices in common areas, like having those kinds of things, rules in place, and every parental control setting engaged on your own phone that you're using, because your kid is probably going to use it too, on computers, all those things. They don't have access to your passwords. They have to ask you. But then as they get older, you begin to, like you said, teach them how to use those devices responsibly. So you start to change some of those rules that you have set in place and some of those restrictions. And so you need to Google something. Tell me what you're looking up. I'm going to be washing dishes in the kitchen. You can be at the kitchen table. I'm not sitting next to you. You're looking it up on your own. But I also know I could just walk over and just look at what you're doing. So there's some level of freedom, and there's also still a level of accountability. And so, like, the rules begin to change like that. But I think by the time your kids are teenagers, like, you have access to their passwords and devices, and they have access to yours. There's nothing to hide. So you begin to create that culture of accountability, but also we are not hiding from each other. We're not doing things that nobody knows about in the family. So that by the time they're an adult and they've moved out on their own, I've given them tools to be able to use things, use devices safely. You can still have those parental controls. Like I have on my own phone, like the parental controls set so that to go onto my own website, I have to put in a passcode because it like flags articles that I've written. And I think that's fine.
That's funny. Today's episode is brought to you by A Gentle Feast. A Gentle Feast offers a complete living books curriculum, an award-winning early reading program, and more tools to equip you to apply Charlotte Mason's timeless philosophy into your modern homeschool. Go to agentlefeast.com to check it out. Smooth and easy days are closer than you think. You're blocking yourself.
Stuff, right? Like, yeah. Which is funny, but also it's because I want to be protected online. I don't just have access to everything. So even as an adult, I have those things in place for myself to protect myself. And my kids would have that as they become adults as well, because we just have the idea like all of us need protection from this stuff. And it's not something that's just for little kids. It's not something we're embarrassed about. It's just common sense and being discerning. And so you create a kind of culture like that starts when they're young, and it doesn't mean you're a bad person that you use monitoring software or safety software. It just means you're a wise, discerning person and you care about the safety of yourself and the people you love.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, is you could have Pentagon level security things on all of your devices, and your kid can still have conversations with people. I know.
Totally.
And I think there's this misconception, and this is just my point of view, so correct me if you like what I want to hear your thoughts too. But that in the homeschool space of, because I homeschool and we go to church and my kids are with the kids from youth group or they're with the homeschool co-op, they're not going to have these conversations. They're not going to hear these things from other children. And it has been my personal experience with my own kids, but also just all the homeschool parents and things I serve. That is 100% not the case. It happens at homeschool homes, it happens at youth groups, that kids are talking to your kids about things that they're looking at, things that they're, and then your kids are like, well, what does that mean? Or even just asking for nude pictures happening from other kids in the co-op and things. So it's not, and I think parents can think, if I have all these safeguards on devices, then we're fine. We don't need to have the conversation. So has that come up for you at all? Or am I just, that's been my experience?
You're not off base at all. That's so true. And I think we want to believe it's true. Oh, my kids are homeschooled. We go to church. Like, my kids are good kids. Yes, of course your kids are good kids. Your kids' friends are good kids. But pornography is incredibly tempting. It's incredibly, I'm trying to think of the right word. I can think of so many, but what am I trying to say? Pornography is it's a tool that Satan is using to attract even the best kids who want to make the best decisions.
Yes.
And it's everywhere. There was just a study done by Barma that talked about pornography use in the church, and the numbers are staggering. Like 80% of, I think it was in the 80s of percent of men who confess to using pornography in at least once a month, men who are regularly going to church. So just because your kid is involved in church in the youth group, or they're super involved in their homeschool group and they have the best friends, they just are amazing kids, doesn't mean they're immune to the temptation of pornography. And so that means we should all talk to our kid. And even if your kid made it to 18 and they've never been exposed to anything, nobody's ever asked them for a nude picture or shown them porn, that's amazing. They have
Yeah.
all of those years of that
Mhm.
kind of freedom and safety. But what happens when they're 19 and they left home and somebody asks them for the first time for a nude picture or sends them one and you've
Mhm.
never talked to them about it? So they don't even know what to do. And they make maybe they do respond by sending a picture or they take a look at that picture the person sent and then they get caught in a web of sextortion because
Mhm.
that's happening like crazy. It's like one of the number one problems that is happening to especially teenage boys in America.
Mhm.
So, and there's no, it doesn't matter like where the kid grows up or what his life has been like, they're all susceptible. So we've got to talk to our kids because it doesn't matter if they're under the age of 18 and they've never seen anything. What happens to them after? We as parents need to protect them now and prepare them for the future. It's all part of our job.
Yes. Okay. So parents who have never heard that term before, and I really appreciate in the book that you don't just talk about what we typically think of, oh, I went online and I watched a video, pornography, that like there's
Mm,
all these other things that are also happening to our kids. So what do you mean
yeah.
by sextortion?
Sextortion is when a person basically takes a person, some other. So, okay, let me see if I can explain it succinctly. We're talking about being succinct, and it's not my gifting. But basically, sextortion, you say your kid is talking to somebody through a video game that they're playing or through social media, just chatting in messages, right? They're private, and the person is, wow, you're really cute. You're so handsome. You're so beautiful. I'd love a picture of you. And at first, that's all it is. And then quickly escalates to, can you send me a topless picture? Can you send me a picture with no shirt on? Can you send me a nude picture? And your child, who their prefrontal cortex is not developed, they make foolish decisions and they're caught up in the moment and they send that picture. And suddenly that person reveals themselves not to be a cute 16-year-old girl or a handsome 17-year-old guy, but they're an adult and they say, oh, you just sent me this picture of yourself nude. And if you don't pay me $500 right now, I'm going to send it to everyone. And they're all going to know you sent these naked pictures to me and you're going to be so ashamed. Send me $500 now. That's called a sextortion. And so it's basically blackmailing somebody with
Mm.
this highly sensitive material and your kid is just stuck. They're
Mm.
terrified. They have no idea what to do. And
Oh,
$500, like that's hardly any money. But to them, to a teenager who those are the most susceptible, middle school and teenagers, especially
mhm.
boys, they're staggered by that number. And it's happening so much that the FBI and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children say this is the number one problem facing teenage and middle school boys in America right now. The
Wow.
numbers of them who are being sexually exploited in this way. And parents, if you don't talk to your kids about it, if they don't know what to do in that situation when someone asks them for a nude, or a lot of times, boys especially are sending them to girls,
Yeah.
and your daughter doesn't know what to do when she gets this picture because you've never told them, they're going to be
Hmm.
shocked. Then if they respond, they're going to feel so ashamed and they're going to think, I can't tell anybody now because then
Hmm.
everyone's going to know. So you need to tell them in advance, even if you send the picture, man, that was not the decision I'd want you to make, but that's okay. We're not even going to talk about that right
Hmm.
now. Right now, we're going to deal with this person who's trying to do a crime. You're not the criminal, they are, and we're going to get help.
Wow. Yeah, I'm so glad I asked that question because that, yeah, I didn't realize the extent. So, wow. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think too, like just from my experience and some of the things that I've been around, it's other kids, not like criminal, like asking them for money, but just more
Yeah.
of, I'm going to send this to all the kids in our
Yeah.
class or in our youth group
Yes,
or
which is a
all this other stuff.
form.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's still a form of sexual
Yeah.
harassment and
Absolutely.
exploitation. And it doesn't even have to involve money. It's a type of bullying. It's so
Hmm.
wrong, but
Yeah, it's
it
really wrong.
happens because it's such an easy way to prey on somebody in their most vulnerable state.
Yeah. And you took a very unique kind of stance with your kid. How old are your kids now, by the way?
20, 18, 16, and 13.
Okay, okay. So
So
similar.
2 young
We're
adults.
in the
And
trenches
yeah.
together, girl.
Yes.
So, um,
Yes, we are.
you took a very unique stance in terms of phones and social media. Can you explain a little bit
Yeah.
about this is why we decided that, but then also like how does that actually play out in their lives?
Yeah. It's so interesting because when I wanted to write this book for 15 years, but it took years of learning more to be ready to write it, but also to be ready to share our story and to be in a place of healing where we could. But also, I think it's so amazing the way God works because if I would have written this book, 10 years ago when my kids were all young and I really could have practically no interaction with devices like I did when they were all really young, I would have had I think I would have missed a huge part
Mhm.
of the picture, which is the reality of when your kids get older and they need
Mhm.
to be on
Yep.
devices and they need to use them for real life and they need to be trained how to use them well. Because when my kids were all 10 and under, yeah, it was super easy.
Yeah.
It was very easy to
Yep.
control them on devices, right? It was a breeze. And I
Yeah,
had this
I look back
idea
to those
of,
Kindle tablets. Oh,
we didn't even have a Kindle. If they wanted to listen to a book, they used my phone and they all listened together. Like it was so easy. But then your kids do get older and they need to have email and they have to get a job and they have to be on some sort of group chat for their work or classes that they're taking, whatever. And so we need to give them tools to be able to do that, to teach them how to use devices well, but also they need access. So for us, it was at first, it was like, okay, you can't have a phone till you're 18. And that felt like a really easy thing to do when they were young.
yeah.
But then we found, okay, that hard and fast rule doesn't necessarily work for every kid because every kid's situation is different at 17, 18, 19 years old. So, like our first kid, he didn't have a smartphone until he was 18, but the next was 17, and our daughter was 16. And my kids are like, oh, then the youngest, he's going to get it
Yeah.
when he's 13 because the baby. But no, we're not doing that. But I have stuck to, so it became, okay, let me backtrack. We have said you get a smartphone when you actually need it for things like driving or work or school. There's a purpose and a reason that you need it. But then for social media, I have pretty much stood my ground on that. I think social media, they're best served to wait to be on social media till they're 17, 18 years old. I think that they're, again, that prefrontal cortex, making wise choices. Social media has the capacity for a lot of bad choices to be made and to be exposed to things they don't need to see, to post things they don't need to see. And so to steer clear of that till they're just a little older and can make better choices. And you spend some time helping them learn how to navigate it. And then when they're 17, 18 years old, if they want it, they can have it. So far, I have one who waited. He got it when he was 18 and he uses it for his art. He's a personal artist and he uses social media for his art business. My next son has no interest in social media and I don't push him for that. I'm like, I don't feel like, oh, you're missing out. You really need to be on it.
No.
That's his decision. And I think he's happy because of
Yep.
it. Um, and then my daughter has asked, she's 16, and she's asked if she could have it for her art. She's an artist as well. And I've really grappled with that because I was like, I get it. You want to sell art like your brother does, get jobs. But I still think she doesn't need it yet. I don't want her to get that dopamine hit that comes from the
Yep.
likes. I think she needs to be a little older and have just a little more maturity till she gets to that point. Now, every family is different. You don't have to go by those rules, but I will firmly state and still firmly believe the older your kid is before they get on social media, the better. I won't give you a hard and fast age, but I think the older
Yes.
they are, the better. And same with smartphones. So just wait until it's actually necessary. Your 12-year-old, it's not necessary. They don't need a smartphone. They certainly don't need social media. Like 13 is not the magic age. Get a TikTok. No, Do not give your 13-year-old.
No.
Stay away.
And there's so many alternatives too that weren't necessarily around when
Mm-hmm.
my older ones, were in those teenage years, that you can have phones that can have apps that don't have all the internet, and watches
Yes.
that can call. And there's so much stuff now that wasn't available, which is
Yes.
wonderful, right? So you have a lot more
Yeah.
choices and options.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up our call today, if there's one message of hope you can give parents on this topic,
Mhm.
what would it be?
Yeah, there is. There's a lot of hope. And I think that we are tempted in this area to parent out of fear.
Yes. Yep.
We're afraid to have the first conversation. We're afraid of what that if we say something, we're going to make our kids curious and
Yep.
they're going to go look. We're afraid, so we don't say anything, or we're afraid that of what they're going to see. So we build these like walls and sense around our kids to keep them safe. And we don't let them
Mhm.
have access to anything because we think, oh, that'll be the ticket. They'll never see anything if I build this safe, put them in this safe little bubble. And so we parent out of fear in all these different ways. But I want to say we don't have to parent out of fear because God is bigger than pornography. Instead, we need to parent from a place of hope, and we need to parent from a place of educating ourselves and educating our kids, and then understanding even if our kids are exposed to something, and they will be at some point as children or as an adult, that we've given them the tools to say, I should not have seen that, or I wish I hadn't seen that. But God has the capacity to forgive me. You, mom and dad, have the capacity to forgive me. And I'm going to move forward in making better choices. And having that understanding, I think, helps us rather than to stay stuck in fear and do nothing, say
Mhm.
nothing, hide, we can step forward in faith, knowing that God loves our kids and He's given us the task to protect them from a hot stove, crossing the street by themselves, stranger danger, and pornography. Like He's given us the capacity to protect them in all those places.
Mhm.
And we do our best. And then we give them to God and we ask Him to protect them in the ways that we can't. And we parent holding on to that hope. That is the hope that God's given us.
100%. That was so beautifully said. And with resources like your book and the scripts that you put in there, I love that you did that. And just some of the other resources, like, we don't have to do this alone. And I think this is part of the collective conversation of mom saying, like, we're done with this. Like, Satan, you're not going to get our
Mm,
kids, and we're going to fight, and we're going to
amen.
fight together. And it's like you said, like, it's coming out of that shame and being willing to step out into the light and be like, we're done pretending this doesn't exist. We're done pretending like we can figure it all out ourselves. We're done feeling like we have to control everything because we're afraid. We're just done. And so we're going to help each other, and we're
Yeah.
going to talk to each other, and we're going to be there and cry with each other when something happens to our kids or happens to us, but we're not going to be quiet
Yeah.
anymore. So thank you for shedding the light on
Amen.
us. Gotta get a
Thank you. I love that. We're not going to be quiet anymore. High five. Yes. I approve. I approve that
so
message. Yeah.
your book will be out when this airs on all book lovely channelness. Where else can parents connect with you?
Mm. The place I'm most active is Instagram, and you can find me by searching Ma and Pa Modern or just by searching Greta Eskridge. I do have a website, gretaeskridge.com, and my book will be everywhere you can find books. And yeah, I'd love for you to get it and to put it to use and to begin parenting from a place of hope, because we are not going to be quiet anymore. We're going to talk about it. It's time to
Yes.
talk to our kids about porn, and we can do it. We
I
can.
love it. I love it. Thank you so much for having the courage to write this. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks for listening to my conversation with Greta today. I know that is a difficult topic, but I hope our episode and this conversation gave you some hope and some encouragement. So let's recap with some key takeaways. Number one, be proactive, not reactive. The best time to talk to your kids about pornography is before they encounter it, equipping them with a plan for what to do. Number two, shame thrives in silence. If your child has been exposed, don't respond with anger or shame. Create a safe, open space for honest conversations. Number 3, porn culture is everywhere. Kids don't need a smartphone to be exposed. They can see inappropriate content through peers, social media, and even their homeschool and church environments. Number 4, parent out of hope, not fear. God is bigger than pornography. Our job isn't to shield kids from everything, but to prepare them with wisdom and discernment. And last but not least, we're not alone in this fight. Mamas, let's link arms, share the same, and start talking. We're stronger together, and our kids need us to be bold. If this episode resonated with you, please send me an email at admin@agentlefeast.com. I would love to know what other moms are ready to join this fight together. Thanks so much for listening. Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this episode, please heart it down below and make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. Leave a comment and let me know what you learned in today's episode. I'd love to hear from you.